A famous quote from The Usual Suspects says,
"The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist."
That is, assuming the devil is even real to begin with. By tricking the world into believing he doesn't exist, he could pull other devious tricks on us without us knowing. Or as Pope Francis put it, we should not think of the devil as a myth, a representation, a symbol, a figure of speech, or an idea. This mistake could lead us to let down our guard. But what if the devil wasn't real? Then perhaps the very question of his existence would be more of a hindrance than anything else. In my last video essay, I analyzed the core psychology of the devil as found in LDS scripture and compared it to writings by Friedrich Nietzsche on preachers of equality. But this time around, I want to assume the devil doesn't exist by contextualizing it with Satoshi Kon's Paranoia agent. I will do this by also analyzing famed Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung's theory of the shadow. Then you will know why this particular anime hit too close to home for me. When you first start watching Paranoia Agent, you will be greeted with a loud and obnoxious song blaring in your ears. The images which accompany the music are of various people in terrible environments, whether it be about to jump off a building, falling from the sky, standing in a garbage field, underwater, on a freezing mountain, in outer space without a suit, or in front of a nuclear explosion. I'm not sure what the old homeless lady standing in a fancy dining hall represents, but I suppose it follows the idea of people not in their natural environment. All of the individuals are laughing uncontrollably as if they, along with the fast-paced music, cannot believe the unbelievably absurd situations they are in. Following this intro, we find ourselves in Tokyo, Japan. Numerous people are talking on their phones saying, "I'm sorry," and making up excuses. And this is what the show is about. People using excuses, or rather fantasies, to escape their absurd situations. It's a long and complex math problem that could take a whole lifetime to solve, even for one detective in particular. Enough to drive one insane. The first episode begins with a rather plain young woman named Tsukiko Usagi, a character designer whose cartoon dog Maromi has earned Hello Kitty levels of praise. She is pressured into creating another character to make the company even more money. Delete, delete, delete. One failed concept after another. It all amounts to great anxiety. One dark night, she is walking home alone when suddenly the darkness catches up to her, and she is struck over the head. Waking up in the hospital, she describes her assailant as an elementary school kid who wears a baseball cap, rides around on rollerblades, and wields a dented golden baseball bat. In English, he is called Little Slugger, or if you are watching in Japanese, he is known as Shonen Bato. The detectives working the case, Kenchi and Mitsuru, suspect the possibility that the whole thing was all in Miss Sagi's head, but then we start hearing about others report being attacked by the same kid. As the audience, we start to wonder if these other people too are just making it up. But then, a real suspect is caught, a junior high school student who calls himself a holy warrior on a quest to free anyone who had been possessed by an evil called Goma. The kid is far too delusional for the detectives to get to him, so they decide to play along. The kid eventually confesses that he only struck 2 victims.
He's nothing more than a shadow of a shadow.
A copycat inspired by the rumors. The homeless old lady reveals that she was an eyewitness to Tsukiko Sagi's attack and saw no one. Miss Sagi had struck herself in the leg in frustration. Little Slugger was all in her head. When the detectives confront her about it, she is struck by an invisible force. Little Slugger represents the feeling of great anxiety, like we have been cornered, and desire any absolute and immediate solution to our problems. For Miss Sagi, her story allowed her to take a break from work and recover her sanity. When her story spread, others caught hold of it and followed suit. A boy who was bullied at school for being accused of being Little Slugger is freed from the accusations when he claims to have been struck. A woman whose personality was split in 2 erases her second personality temporarily by claiming to be struck. Another young woman struck by Little Slugger loses her memories of her horrible father, and so on and so on. The feeling of relief these people feel is something they are not likely to forget. However, things take a turn for the worst when the copycat kid was feeling so under pressure by the police that he took his own life while still in jail. The police thought they saw a phantom resembling Little Slugger escape back into the shadows and through a wall. More false rumors are spread by gossiping housewives attempting to one-up each other. One by one, the stories become more and more absurd. We wonder if any of them are true, such as a woman suddenly carrying a baby who holds a dented bat, or one of Little Slugger appearing to bat at a baseball game, or another of a young man painting the last leaf on a vine to ensure a sick lover stays alive, only to be struck by Little Slugger. One woman almost accuses her of stealing the idea of a painted last leaf from O. Henry's short story, The Last Leaf. When one of the women returns to her husband, she sees that he had been struck in the head. When asked what happened, he says that Little Slugger got him. Instead of being worried for her husband and calling an ambulance, she demands he tell her all the details so she can truly one-up her friends next time. An overworked animator on a Moromi show feels so intense pressure by the deadline and workload that he begins acting out violently, striking his coworkers and blaming it all on Little Slugger. The Phantom is becoming all too real now as Satoshi Kon brings out his mastery of blurring the lines between reality and fiction. A trio of oddballs who met on the internet seeking to end their lives in one way or another for unexplained reasons encounter Little Slugger in the dead of night and give chase, but soon enough they realize that they are already dead as they don't have shadows like everything else. Yes, shadows, that is the key. Little Slugger is the shadow of Moromi, as revealed in the first episode. People like the oddball trio are detached from reality and quickly lose sight of their shadows. Those who feel totally consumed by shadow are struck by Little Slugger. And in episode 11, the agent of Paranoia himself is almost totally shown as nothing more than a shadow. Here is where we get into Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. But first, what is a shadow in general? A shadow is a dark image of a physical subject that blocks rays of light. In psychotherapy, a shadow is the same but for personality traits. We all have deep secrets that we don't want anyone to know about lest our public image is ruined. Our public persona and our shadow persona become split, as any aspect of ourselves is shoved into the subconscious to become unconscious. Like the homosexual raised in a conservative religious family, he may feel the need to suppress his romantic interests towards men, lest he hurts his family. However, the longer we shove aspects of ourselves down into our subconscious, the blacker and denser they become, and that side of us could lash out violently. For the repressed homosexual, this could result in feelings of resentment towards his parents or spouse if he adopted a straight lifestyle, without honestly confronting them about his shadow. He becomes shadow possessed. As Carl Jung wrote, by not being aware of having a shadow, you declare a part of your personality to be non-existent. Then it enters the kingdom of the non-existent, which swells up and takes on enormous proportions. If you get rid of qualities you don't like by denying them, you become more and more unaware of what you are. You declare yourself more and more non-existent, and your devils will grow fatter and fatter. From the show, we have the example of Harumi Chono, an elementary school tutor who takes up prostitution as a side job to make more money. However, she is so embarrassed by this side of her persona that eventually her personality splits. When she attempts to suppress this personality further after getting engaged, throwing out all her prostitute clothes and quitting the job, the prostitute personality fights back. The dueling personalities continue to fight late into the night and out onto the street until Harumi is struck by Little Slugger, or so she believes. One of her students told her how Little Slugger relieved his burden by being struck.
Little Slugger set me free.
Little Slugger had become a mass hysteria as his legend spread. Some people have compared this to real-world mass hysteria like the Dancing Plague of 1518 or the Killer Clown Scare of 2016, though I think a more apt comparison would be the Halifax Slasher of 1938. Many people in Halifax, England reported being slashed by a man. Some were falsely accused, and vigilantes would beat them up. However, the mass hysteria soon ended as one by one people admitted that they had actually slashed themselves. Why two women started the rumor of being attacked by the Halifax Slasher is unknown, but I still find it to be a real-world apt comparison. But let me pose this question to you. What is an even more worldwide comparison? Little Slugger in the show had been used as a scapegoat for many great anxieties. Instead of the characters saying they lashed out violently on their own and severely injured themselves, they blamed Little Slugger. Perhaps the devil too is just a fictitious scapegoat we use, such as saying, "I don't know what the devil got into me." morality, blaming the devil for tempting us to do immoral actions. We blame the devil instead of taking responsibility for ourselves. There could be some truth behind this theory. It could be part of Jung's idea of shadow projection, where we blame negative aspects of ourselves on other people. As Carl Jung wrote, "The world is still full of scapegoats, just as it formerly teemed with witches and werewolves." The scapegoat originates from the book of Leviticus, in which the high priest would lay his hands on the goat's head and confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel and their transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a suitable man. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to an uninhabited land, and he shall release the goat in the wilderness. Why a goat? Because goats were seen as more rebellious and self-centered than the humble and obedient sheep. So the goat was associated with the devil, as some early Christians believed that the devil created animals of his own, which would be twist mirror versions of gods. And one need look no further than the goat-inspired aspects of medieval devil designs. The devil himself has a rather complicated history that may lead one to believe he is an invention of early Christians. Satan plays an extremely minor role in the Old Testament. In the book of Job, the Hebrew word Satan more so seems to refer to a title for an angel of God's court who plays an accuser role, like in the court of law, rather than a solely evil being. Isaiah's reference of Lucifer seems to be more so attributed to an earthly ruler. The snake in Genesis was originally just a devious snake, and the idea of a cosmic evil being to oppose an all-righteous God doesn't seem to appear until Zoroastrianism. So it is definitely interesting why Joseph Smith Jr. decided to include so much emphasis on a cosmic evil being named Satan in his retranslation of the King James Version of Genesis. But I'll link Religion for Breakfast's more detailed video on the history of Satan in the description box below. Returning to Paranoia Agent, I don't think it is a coincidence that Little Slugger becomes more and more demonic as more and more people believe in him, as if their collective belief in him willed him into existence and gave him power. Here's where we may get into Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious, the idea that all humans share similar beliefs and archetypes buried in the deepest parts of their subconscious. Little Slugger, like the devil in the real world, had become a part of the show's world collective shadow. Even as the character of Moromi continues to grow in popularity, so too does Little Slugger. Both are used to escape from harsh anxieties of the world, but as the show tells us, a makeshift salvation is nothing but deception. For Moromi is indeed seen as a source of joy and comfort for the people, but as Jung wrote, the devil is an evil element, but joy? If you run after it, you see that joy also had evil in it. Since then you arrive at pleasure, and from pleasure go straight to hell, your own particular hell, which turns out differently for everyone. So we might want to contemplate the things that give us joy and comfort, and whether or not they are inadvertently leading us to hell. Near the end of the show, when everything Moromi suddenly vanishes, everyone becomes consumed with nihilism and despair.
I know! It's happening because Moromi's gone!
Their past traumas quickly catch up to them. In the last 3 episodes in the show, the 2 detectives, Kichi and Mitsuru, have been fired from police duty and now lead meaningless lives. Both fall victim to comfortable escapist fantasies rather than facing the real world. They lose sight of their egos and are totally consumed and possessed by the shadow. But as per Jung, for one to be a complete self, one needs both shadow and ego. One needs to have a sit down with his devil inside and have an understanding with him. As he wrote, I would be fleeting if I did not try to come to an understanding with him. If ever you have the rare opportunity to speak with the devil, then do not forget to confront him in all seriousness. He is your devil after all. Kichi throughout the show would use cigarettes as a comfort to relax his anxieties. But as the cigarettes are ironically called, it is only a short hope. He talks about how every crime has a reason and motive behind it. So when he encounters the case of Lil Slugger, he becomes baffled by it as he cannot find any reason or motive. At the end of the show, he imagines a world with cardboard cutouts resembling Japan in the 1950s, when the lines between good and evil were much more clear-cut. Where he could be a simple cop chasing after a simple robber. A world where he confuses Misagi as his daughter, when his daughter in the real world was a stillborn. He quickly lost track of reality when his sick and dying wife needed him most. Mitsuru, in his obsession with tracking down and slaying the devil Lil Slugger, becomes enveloped in the fantasy of a vigilante superhero with the power of radio waves. He is driven to seek out Miss Soggy's father in order to discover Little Slugger's origin and weakness. In the end, he becomes a mad, decrepit old man, still attempting to solve the long math problem of reality versus fiction. But for the one who started it all, Sakuki Sagi, her confrontation with her devil takes a rather personal turn for me. It is revealed that her hallucinations about a boy with a baseball bat and rollerblades started in her early childhood. Her inspiration for Moromi was her childhood pet of the same name. One day, when taking Moromi out for a walk, she felt a cramp in her stomach, which caused her to let go of the dog's leash. Moromi the dog then proceeded to run into oncoming traffic. Devastated, she quickly made up the story on the spot that instead of her own negligence which got her dog killed, fearing her father might punish her, it was a boy with a baseball bat. But her father saw through her made-up story, but decided to play along with it anyways, which only fed into the delusion. The paranoid delusion. I was lying sick in bed when I first watched this moment. It's been almost a whole year, and I successfully blocked it out of my head until I was rewatching the show for this essay. I was reminded of it again. Running from my demons, running from myself, denying tender parts of myself. It was a bright afternoon day sitting at home with my sister, but then a phone call came in with a tearful mother on the other end. I laid my hands on his tender little hairy body. It was still warm. There I stood at the pet hospital. He had been run over by a car. The poor little guy. His spine was broken beyond repair and he was suffering, so they had to put him down. I wasn't sure what to do. I never felt this before. I knew I couldn't blame myself for what had happened, yet I couldn't stop myself from weeping. I couldn't stop myself even as I just got in my car one day to drive back to the pet hospital. I wondered if I could have prevented it by taking him with me to shoot an outdoors short film with a friend. Who knows how many more scenarios flashed through my mind. I then turned to and thought on the power of God. He revived people in Bible stories all the time. Why not my dog, my friend, my brother? But then my dad called me and forced me back to reality. There was nothing I could do. This was the world I had to live in, even if I didn't like it. I can't live in my own little fantasy world forever. Tsukuki Sagi had to remember her own dog's death, as she was consumed by her shadow. She had to say, "I'm sorry," and let him go. She found herself rising from her subconscious realm, represented by the sea, and returned, after she refused to return. While there is nothing wrong with escaping into fantasy for a little bit, one should always ensure they have a firm understanding between fiction and reality. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Look inward and recognize that the devil within is you.
And then...
Thanks for watching. Like, share, comment, and subscribe for more in that exact order. And remember to keep it righteous.